Hey guys, this week we're concentrating on what you chew, and the component of the success path that we are focusing on improving is choosing organic. And this is really important because, we often believe that the food which we are eating is safe. However, this is not always the case. And that's because food is really only as safe as it is grown and manufactured. And therefore, the safest food to eat is organic food. So what is organic exactly? Well, organic farmers and food producers grow and produce food without using synthetic chemicals, such as pesticides and artificial fertilizers. They do not use genetically modified components or expose foods to irradiation. Organic foods are foods in their most natural state, just as nature has provided. And some examples of organic produce include things like, fruit and vegetables, dried legumes, grains, meats, and meat-based products, dairy foods, eggs, honey, and some processed foods. Any food can be organic or non-organic depending upon the processes it has been through. Okay, so why is it so important to eat organic? Well, it's important because due to the many of the processes which non-organic foods go through, they can be really, really unsafe. And some of the dangers of non-organic foods include genetically modified, otherwise known as GM. So genetically modified foods are foods which have been genetically modified or altered from their natural occurring states. So genes from other sources have been introduced into these foods in order to ward off pests or disease and increased yield or profitability. Now, no long-term studies have been done on the effects of genetically modified foods on humans. However, many have been done on animals, which indicate things like infertility, immune problems, accelerated aging, problematic insulin regulation, stomach problems, a reduction in digestive enzymes, liver toxicity, allergic reactions, antibiotic resistance, cancer, and much more. Another danger is the manure and fertilizers used in non-organic farming. So manure such as animal poo or blood and bone contain anything which the animal was exposed to in its life, including hormones and antibiotics. And what happens is these are then absorbed by the plant and into our own body when we eat it ourselves. And that raises an important point if you're vegan, in which case you need to eat 100% organic produce to avoid eating animal products itself. Natural fertilizers like peat moss and potash are fine, but chemical fertilizers can also be dangerous to your health in many ways. The next and most commonly known danger of not eating organic is the pesticides or insecticides which are applied directly to the unwanted pests of plants and can be either non-systemic or systemic. And non-systemic pesticides are topical and can be mostly washed off a plant before consumption. On the other hand, systemic pesticides are chemicals that are actually absorbed by a plant when applied to seeds, soil, or leaves. The chemicals then circulate through the plant's tissues, killing the insects that feed on them. And unlike with traditional insecticides, you can't wash or peel off systemic pesticide residues. And pesticides are often sprayed generally more on summer rather than winter crops, due to increased pests during those seasons. And they are also excessively sprayed on out-of-season crops, which is a real worry when you consider that nearly all fruit and vegetables are available in our supermarkets all year around, okay? And also because not all of us are aware what fruit and veggies are grown in what season. So next time you want to buy tomatoes in winter or broccoli in summer, take into consideration the impact that these excessive additional pesticides may be having on your health. Next you have fungicides. Okay, so fungicides sound similar to pesticides and insecticides, but it's a little bit different. Instead, fungicides are chemicals used to cure diseases in crops and to protect seeds during shipment and storage itself. And many of the chemicals have adverse effects that harm the skin and lungs, like for example asthma, and the eyes. Fungicide chemicals are known to cause contact dermatitis, chronic skin disease, visual disturbances, pulmonary edema, and other effects as well. Most fungicides are poisonous when ingested, and some can even be fatal. Another similar sounding one is herbicides. Okay, and these are chemical substances used to control or manipulate all or selected undesirable vegetation, especially weeds. And some herbicides have been labeled endocrine disruptors and have been linked to things like cancer, miscarriages, and much more. The more herbicides are used, the more resistant weeds and pests become to them. Okay, so it means the more we need to keep spraying. So next we have irradiation, which is not so commonly known. And this is just where food is treated with ionizing radiation to kill bacteria and parasites that would otherwise cause foodborne disease. And similar technology is used to sterilize medical devices in hospitals so that they can be used in surgery applications. At high doses, food is essentially sterilized, just as what occurs in a canning process itself. Products treated with irradiation can be stored at room temperature almost indefinitely, which is really great for supermarket chains who don't have to worry about fresh produce going rotten or getting spoiled on their shelves. However, the research also indicates that irradiation also can destroy vitamins like vitamin B and nutrients, disrupt proteins and essential fatty acids, and corrupt the flavor, the texture, and the odor of food itself. Non-organic produce often also contains growth hormones, okay? And this includes artificial synthetic growth hormones that are injected directly into the animals and also added to their feed to enhance their growth rate and the amount of eggs and dairy, including milk, fish and meat that they produce in a shorter time period. And research indicates that growth hormones in food can lead to things such as cancer and diabetes. So it's not really good. Now, we've all heard about the next one, and that is antibiotics. In order to increase profits, many companies no longer allow animals to freely roam the land, but instead confine them to small, heavily crowded, and often unsanitary places, which is pretty sad. In order to make sure that these animals don't get disease from their, poor conditions, they routinely feed them large amounts of antibiotics. The feed, such as corn mash, which these animals are given, contains even larger and unregulated amounts of antibiotics, meaning we are really getting a double dose. And this is leading to a new generation of drug resistant superbugs, if you like. And in fact, even viral infections like the everyday common cold and flu are increasingly becoming untreatable with antibiotics. So that's not good either. Next, we have aesthetically enhanced. And what I'll say here is that in order to sell more, in order to increase profits, food manufacturers often make food more attractive. For example, in the wild, salmon get their beautiful color by eating krill and shrimp, which contain a reddish orange compound called astaxanthin. However, farmed salmon, which live in a pen, are fed kibble made from fish waste, corn, gluten, ground up feathers, soybeans, chicken fat, and genetically engineered yeast. This gives them a dull grey flesh, which is not very attractive. So in order to get the perfect colour, astaxanthin is synthesized in a lab using petrochemicals and given to the farmed fish. Not good. Another example would be the beautiful looking shiny apples, that you buy that are full of wax. Just pour some boiling water over one and see how much wax actually comes off. You'd be surprised. Look, virtually all processed foods contains a various array of chemicals to increase the appearance of it. Because at the end of the day, sadly, it's about profit. Next, we have ripening agents, okay? And natural ripening is a physiological process which makes the fruit edible, palatable, and nutritious as well. During ripening, fruits, soften, they change color and characteristics, aroma, and all of the flavors develop. However, today, so much of the fruit that we eat is actually artificially ripened. And this is done to achieve faster and more uniform ripening characteristics. It allows many fruits to be picked prior to full ripening, which is useful since ripened fruits do not ship well. For example, bananas are picked when they're green and artificially ripened after shipment by being gassed with ethylene. Artificially ripened fruit produce less nutrients and also are less tasteful. The substances used are often toxic as well. For example, calcium carbide contains traces of arsenic and phosphorus, and the research shows that it's been linked to cancer and a host of other health problems as well. In a similar way, lots of produce is also gassed with chemicals like Smart Fresh, which actually do the opposite. They stop the ripening process itself. You're probably thinking, why would they want to do such a thing? Well, it's done to increase the shelf storage life. Sure, we all know that fresh is best. However, much of what we eat isn't actually fresh. Instead, it's stored in cold storage for long periods before we actually buy it. For example, tomatoes are stored up to about 2 months, carrots are stored up to about 9 months, potatoes up to about 12 months, and apples up to 2 years in cold storage. The result is less taste and obviously less nutritional properties. Think about it. When was the last time you bought fresh produce from your local supermarket, which was absolutely bursting with flavor and tasted amazing? One which, tasted like it was homegrown. It's little wonder why homegrown, apples and tomatoes or anything else often tastes so much better than shop bought ones. And that's why I've got my garden out there and I grow it all myself. Well, most of it anyway. Obviously, if you are not used to eating organic, then you won't really know what you're missing out on. You won't even notice the taste difference. And so, as you can see, there are many dangers associated with eating non-organic foods, and these are just some of the most common ones. With that said, most of the time, the benefits of non-organic fresh produce outweighs the risks. So please don't let this be a barrier to eating them. So now that you know why choosing organic is so important, I just want to provide some ways in which you can increase your intake of organic produce itself. And the first point I want to touch on is to know when to go or when to forego organic. And I say that because whilst organic produce is always the best choice, it can actually be really, really expensive too. But the truth is that some fruits and vegetables are just as safe to buy conventionally, and they're more affordable too. And there is a way to find out which types of organic produce aren't really necessary. And that's because each year, the Environmental Working Group, otherwise known as the EWG, releases a shopper's guide to pesticides in produce, which is known as the Clean 15 and as the Dirty Dozen. So the Clean 15 is a list of 15 fruits and vegetables with the fewest traces of pesticides. In other words, they are safe to eat even if they are not organic. And these 15 foods include avocados, sweet corn, pineapple, onion, papaya, frozen sweet peas, eggplants, asparagus, cauliflower, cantaloupes, broccoli, mushrooms, cabbage, honeydew melon, and kiwis. On the other hand, the Dirty Dozen is a list of 12 fruits and vegetables that contain the highest level of pesticides. And these include strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, and potatoes. In other words, these are the produce that you should be buying organic and not the Clean 15, so that you can save yourself the worry and confusion and some dough in the process next time you're in the supermarket doing your grocery shopping. In saying that, I just want to make clear that it is okay to eat non-organic produce. And I say this because whether or not it's organic, you still get lots and lots of benefits from eating non-organic produce. Just ensure that you wash it properly first. Okay, so my next tip when it comes to eating organic is to grow your own. Honestly, it's one of the best and cheapest ways to consume more organic produce. And even if you live in a small apartment, you can grow things in containers and in pots, or even up the sides of buildings too. And one of the first things that I believe that everybody should be growing is herbs, which you're probably already using in much of your cooking anyway. But starting a herb garden is really, really simple, and it really doesn't take up that much space. You know, you could even do it in a square meter if you wanted to. Depending upon your taste preferences, you can grow herbs such as parsley, basil, thyme, oregano, mint, sage, rosemary, coriander, lemon balm, and chives. So moving on, growing veggies takes a little more work, but it really is well worth it. And this could include growing things like lettuce. You know, I grow my own lettuce, beans, peas, carrots, cucumbers, tomatoes, kale, broccoli, chards, beetroots, zucchinis, and so much more. And I grow most of these things, especially lettuce. Like, we eat so much lettuce every single day. We eat lettuce from the garden. My kids love it too, which is a bonus. And if you have the space, then I'd also encourage you to grow your own fruit as well. Instead of only planting trees for their aesthetic value, planting a few fruit trees and enjoy the delicious fruits that come every single season. Okay, so obviously not all fruit grows on trees, such as raspberries and strawberries, which are grown on a shrub or on the ground, which is also great because they take up less space than a normal fruit tree does as well. So some of the kinds of fruits that you can grow include things like apples and apricots and pears and quince, plums, nectarines, or citrus fruits such as grapefruit, lemons and limes and oranges and mandarins. The fruit that I love growing the best is raspberries. They are amazing on their own, or in yogurt. We put them in muesli, we put them in ice cream, in smoothies, and everywhere else. And homegrown raspberries taste nothing like the ones you buy in the shops. They're amazing. You can tell I'm a little bit obsessed. Obviously, growing some of your own produce, it does require work, but there, is really nothing more satisfying and more healthy than doing so. So it's well worth the effort. Even if you just grow some things now and then, experiment, with some more, produce later on. Okay, so once you've determined what you should and shouldn't be buying organic, as well as, what, little bits that you can grow in your own garden, then it's time to get creative and begin sourcing what you may buy organic. And using the internet, the phone, and your friends, find out what you can purchase locally. Okay, is there a farm stand down the road from your child's school, or a farmer's market, one town over? Farmers markets offer better prices and fresher and more unusual produce than your local store, often more organic produce too. And you may also find, a community supported agriculture share, where you buy a box of veggies, fruit, or a variety of local goods from a local farmer for the season. So that's another good way to do it. Sourcing organic products, will take some time to begin with, but simply start with a few of your typical grocery items and then just go from there. It may be likely that you will have to source, organic products across multiple locations, but that depends upon where you live. Everywhere's different. And, this might include, things like, using a combination of going through, this is what we do. We go to the supermarket and we also go to farmers markets and we also buy some of our stuff online. So there's multiple avenues. So next time, you shop for groceries, or even just every time you put something in your mouth, ask yourself, where is this food from? What has it been through, and is it really good for me? These are some eggs from my chickens this morning. Food is an intrinsic part of who we are as being human beings. And if we don't take care of our bodies by being mindful of what we are putting into them, then we will continue to damage them. And at its core, we are organic in structure. So we should use organic products because that's what we are. Natural food is our medicine. So choose local, choose fresh, choose seasonal, and choose to eat organic whenever possible. So what percentage of the food and beverages that you consume are in fact organic? Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to learn more about the other essential attributes of staying in your best shape. And until next time, watch what you chew, do what you need to do, and always live true.